Yeah, right.
Holy jeez.
Wow. It's been a long budget season. Board of Finance, everyone please rise. I'm going to ask Mr. Mottola, who's closest to the flag, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. We have a relatively jam-packed agenda tonight, lots of voting items. We're setting the mill rate for the year, number one. We're reviewing the suspense list for the tax collector, number two. We're looking at some contingency transfers for some public union contracts, number three. We're appointing new auditors for the next fiscal year. We have three items related to DPW and funding, as well as grants to be received, accepted. Actually, there's more than three items. There's like 5 items. We're approving minutes, and then we're appointing the clerk and assistant clerk to the Board of Finance. Any questions, comments, concerns from anyone before we get started? I'm going to ask that we take the items out of order because in deference to some members who are a little bit tardy, I'm sure due to scheduling conflicts and traffic. Before I do so, I'd like to take a moment of personal privilege, though. As you all note, my mom passed away in the past month, and I want to thank 3 different institutions here. First of all, I want to thank the members of this board for sending flowers to the funeral. I greatly appreciate that, my brother and I and our families. Secondly, I'd like to recognize the finance department for the town. They were gracious enough to send flowers as well. And thirdly, I don't know exactly who to thank, but we got one beautiful bouquet that was from the town of Fairfield. So, Mr. Tetreau, as the senior executive for the town, I'd like to thank you. And if you could send along appropriate thanks to whoever arranged that, that was very, very kind. And it was very nice of all you. So thank you very much. With that, I want to skip item number 1, which is the mill rate, if that's okay. And I want to take item number 2, to hear, consider, and act upon the suspense list for the tax collector. Is that item, can I move that item before us? Mr. Brown, do I have a second from this side? Mr. Mottola, the item is now before us. This is a standard kind of ministerial process that we do, where the tax collector looks at old accounts. If you want to come on up, welcome. And we'll just, I don't think we need a presentation, but we'll just go through, ask it. Does anybody have any questions, comments, or concerns on this list? We all have the package in advance. I have one question. What was this amount the last couple of years? Do we know? I want to know whether we're doing better or worse.
So it's about 20,000 higher this year, simply because we do have a business that they went out of business, they filed bankruptcy, and it's a fairly high tax bill.
Which one was that, if you don't mind?
B&H Education.
Okay.
They did file bankruptcy. We did file proof of claim. We were told there wasn't going to be adequate funds in their liquidation.
Okay. And in most instances, these items have been followed up on and followed up on. They're many years old, most of them. And
yes.
Many of them are bankruptcies or...
Yeah, so if they're businesses, they're either bankruptcies, they're out of business.
Yep.
Motor vehicle, we did the 2010 grand list, so, they're well past the 2-year period when the individuals would have come to our office to pay because they had to register.
Yep.
Some of the newer motor vehicles are bankrupt and the debt was discharged or the individual passed away. I do have a delinquent tax collector that diligently keeps, great track of these records and codes them and is, makes certain that they're not going to be collectible, but that doesn't mean they aren't. Like, by law, they're still collectible for 15 years.
So what is the process now? You write these off, essentially,
Yes.
you put them in the suspense, and then what do you do with these accounts? Do you turn them over to somebody that might be able to collect them?
Yes, we turn over the motor vehicles to A&RG. They're a collection agency, which has skip tracing. They have better abilities than us to find these individuals if they did, say, move out of state.
Thank you. Any other questions from board members on this item? Again, this is a normal kind of annual item. Questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, I'm going to motion this for a vote. All in favor of approving the transfer of $144,069.14 to the suspense tax book, as outlined in the memos received before us. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? That item carries. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go on. I'd like to go on to another more mundane item right now. Let's go to item number 10 on our agenda. Does anybody have a concern if I go out of order on the agenda? No. Let's go to item number 10, which is the approval of the minutes. I want to be fair to our clerks and say that the minutes have been available for all of our budget hearings. I ask that we actually break them apart so that we're not sitting here raising our hands and discussing minutes for 2 hours in one meeting. So we'll break this apart over the next couple of meetings. The item before us is to hear, consider, and approve the minutes of the February 7th, 2017 regular meeting, February 23rd quarterly meeting, March 1st combined Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen meeting, March 2nd combined meeting, March 7th combined meeting, and March 9th combined meeting. Can I have a motion to put that before us? Mr. Brown, I'll take Mr. Becker on the second. The item is now before us. Does anybody have any questions, comments, or concerns on the minutes as they stand before us for these meetings? Anyone? Seeing none, what is the board's druthers? Would we like to do these all at once, or would we like to break them apart? Anybody have any issue on it whatsoever? Seeing none, let's bring it all together. So the item before us is to approve the minutes of the February 7th, February 23rd, March 1st, March 2nd, March 7th, and March 9th Board of Finance meetings, the last 4 of them being combined with the Board of Selectmen. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? That item passes. Okay, moving right along. Let's go to another item. Let's go right below that. And we'll go to item number 11, to appoint the clerk and the assistant clerk of the Board of Finance for the next year ending May 2018. Now, you may recall when Mr. Hiller left us, I believe it was back then, and Mrs. Bossi took over as our clerk, I think we put this into our process that every year we would have to reappoint the clerk. And then Mr. Mayor took over as the clerk, and Jennifer Carpenter from the First Selectman's office took over as the assistant clerk, and we kind of broke the job into 2 pieces. Currently stands that way, budgeted at the same amount, which I can't remember off the top of my head, but we did not budget to increase it when we did our thing, so I don't even think that's a consideration here, to be honest with you. Be that as it may, I'm probably the one that works closest with the clerk and the assistant clerk, and they've done a very fine job for us. We all are familiar with Mr. Mayor and how closely we've worked with him, and we worked with him back when he was on this board. He and his team have done a very nice job supporting us, and I have to give special credit to Jennifer Carpenter. She's been absolutely wonderful to work with. Her communication skills are excellent, organization skills. She keeps me on my toes. She's on vacation this week, and she was answering questions from California. So she's very dedicated and done an excellent job. So my recommendation to the board would be that we continue with the current arrangements, but I want to hear if anybody else has any comments, concerns, or questions on this. Anybody? Okay, so I'm going to put this, I don't even know that I put this before, so I'm going to have Mr. Brown, second Mr. Becker. Thank you. So the item is now before us. If there's no more discussion, all in favor of reappointing our current clerk and our current assistant clerk for the Board of Finance for the next calendar year? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? That item carries.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
on behalf of myself and Mrs. Carpenter, thank you, and thank you for the kind words.
Thank you. All right. Moving on. Let's take a look at We did the suspense account. Let's go to item number 3, and we'll start going in order now. To hear, consider, and act upon a request of the Chief Fiscal Officer to transfer $339,510 from the General Fund Contingency to various accounts per the attached schedule in fiscal year 2017 for the Professional and Technical Employees Association settlement, and $18,105 from the WPCA contingency to the various WPCA accounts per the attached schedule in the fiscal year 17 for the Professional and Technical Employees Association settlement. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'll turn it over to you. Well, first of all, Mr. Brown, can you first it? And we'll have Mrs. LeClaire. I'll take as a second. Thank you. And Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is another pretty straightforward, actually, agenda item. We did finalize the PETA contract, which was, I guess, 3 years in arrears, and is actually a pretty favorable contract for the town, I believe. This agenda item is to transfer from the contingency account to the payroll account the salary adjustments related to this fiscal year from the contract, total amount of $339,000, which is actually $17,000 less than what we originally forecast and put in the budget.
Any other questions, comments, concerns from board members on this item? Mr. Becker.
Just the past amounts then that are coming out of previous fiscal years, how exactly is that transferred out? Is that something that we need to
That's
do?
that's a balance sheet transfer.
I know where we are.
Okay.
Balance sheet to the
So at
to the
some point,
expense.
do we approve that in transfers, or that's just done and the auditors okay it?
Yes.
Okay.
So you don't know where we did. I'm just catching up, Mr. Walsh and Mr. Hopkins. We did number 3, or rather number 2, sorry, number 10 and numbers 11. And we're currently in the midst of number 3. So I'm sorry, Mr. Becker, I didn't mean to interfere there. Mr. DeWitt, did you have a question, please?
You think I'd know this after so long, but, so, what are we setting the mill rate for, FY 17 tonight?
18.
FY 18, okay. So, this is adjustment of the current budget that we're executing, and this number will also be added, or some higher number, to FY 18 as well, yes?
No. It's not an adjustment to the budget. It's simply a transfer.
No, I understand.
Right. And
But we don't do a requisite transfer in the current budget, or does that just happen later? For FY 18?
This is the current budget.
No,
for
what he's
FY
saying is,
18.
do we need to do this for the
No,
2018 budget?
18, it's in the...
I mean, we still have to
it's in the
do it because
contingency, right.
it's still
Right,
short, the
because-
budget's short, right?
It's the estimate for next year of the anticipated settlement is in the contingency account.
No,
So we will need
understand.
to adjust.
Right,
We
yeah.
will need
And it'll
to.
be X number % higher than this based on whatever the agreed-upon rate was, right? So we will have to transfer money
Yeah.
in the current budget that we're going to sign
Right.
tonight. Okay.
All set, Mr.
Yes,
DeWitt?
I am. Thank you.
Anybody else on this item? Seeing none, I'm going to call this for a vote. The item to vote is to transfer $339,510 from the general fund contingency to various accounts per the attached schedule in the fiscal year 2017 for the Professional and Technical Employees Association settlement, and $18,105 from the WPCA contingency to the various WPCA accounts per the attached schedule in the fiscal year 2017 for the Professional and Technical Employees Association settlement. All right, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? That item carries, and we are done with that item. So, next item put before us, I'm going to go back to the top of the agenda, which is to consider and set the mill rate for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2017, and ending June 30th, 2018. Can someone put the motion before us, please? Mr. Mottola, seconded by Mr. DeWitt. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Mayor, who's done some analysis for us. Mr. Mayor.
Excuse me, I forgot to turn my phone off. Apologize for that. Right. This is getting a little bit old hat. Those who aren't new this year on the board have seen this schedule. We I think, created it about 3 years ago, and so we'll just quickly go through it. Schedule A, we have the approved budget, $298 million. Then we have the current non-tax revenue, fees, state revenue that's in the budget. Prior year tax interest and liens estimated to be $6,011,000. That's a bigger number this year because we're, as you know, the budget includes the tax sale. Then the credits, the town senior tax relief, and the state elderly and disabled, comes down to a total required tax levy of $280 million to be allocated over a grand list of $10,870 million, which requires a mill rate of 25.82. Excuse me, 25.82 for a percent change increase of 1.45%. Schedule B, a lot of numbers. I don't think we need to go through it, but if anybody has any questions, but it's got the 17 budget, and then the 18 Board of Finance, and this 18 Board of Finance from the 17 budget, and then the RTM and final BAA adjustments, and then the final change. Again, you look at the second line from the bottom on the far right, and it's got the 1.45% increase. It's just more detail of what's on the prior page. Schedule C, potential risk factors. You see this every year as well. I think one first comment, if you look at the fiscal year 18 state revenue shortfall, it says $1.6 million there. To be consistent with my thinking, that number should actually be $1 million, not 1.6. I basically failed to recall that we already have budgeted $600,000 less than what's expected, that we got last year. So the number there was calculated based upon conversation with CCM, other chief CFOs around the state, given their conversations with their relative representatives and state senators, and basically what, you know, the general consensus is that, well, let me back up another step. For those who aren't aware, and for those who may be watching on television who don't follow this stuff as closely as we do, the state is currently facing a $5.1 billion shortfall over the next 2 years. $2.1 billion in the first year and $2.9 billion in the second year, primarily due to a shortage of revenue coming in from tax receipts. A significant portion of that, about $700,000 in the first year, and about $700 million in the first year, $900 million in the second year, is new updated information. Most people are anticipating that there will be a significant future potential, some cut in state revenue, and people talk about it might be from, you know, anywhere from around 50% to, excuse me, 25% to 50%. I was going from the other direction. 25% to 50%. I picked the middle, 62.5%. So if we have a 62.5% reduction after the state budget is, that would be $1.6 million, and as I pointed out, $600,000 is already in the budget, and about $3 million on the top range. Everybody, I'm not sure if
So wait, when you're saying 600,000 is already in the budget, are you saying that 1.6 is really $1 million?
Yes, that's what I was saying.
Okay, so that first number is really 1.9 versus 2.5.
Correct. The second item is there's a pile of debris down at the transfer station that needs to be cleaned up, and the town is at risk for having to pay for that. It may not have to pay for that, but that's estimated to be $200,000. And then the third item is there's concern in the financial markets that interest rates may go up. Our budget included a potential interest rate bump of about a point. That number in the markets has gone up now to maybe 1.75, 175 basis points. So we basically, if interest rates do go up another 100 basis points, for a total of 200 basis points, then we would have a shortfall in our investment income of about $665,000, which gives us a range of 1.9 million to 3.265. I have not included anything in here for the pension plan or the push down of the cost of pension plan from the state. It's still under consideration, but most CFOs in most towns are not including that in their budgets. And then finally, I'd just like to point out that, as you all know, that the town does have an unassigned fund balance that is available for unknown expenditures that may arise, and that amount of that identified fund balance, unassigned fund balance, is $28 million. Going to Schedule D, the next page.
Mr. Mayor, what's under the RTM's budget? How much is in contingency over and above kind of what you asked for when you originally did the budget?
If you take the contingency and all the knowns, what's available for everything is about $585,000. That would be normal contingency plus anything else. That would be the snow removal.
Plus anything, plus the state
plus
thing.
the state.
Okay, so that's not just the state thing. What did you originally ask for? You asked for 300,000 or 350.
Well, I originally asked for 450, but I think the first selectman.
What did you guys come before us asking for?
300, I think.
Okay, so there's an additional 285 in there.
Correct.
Okay. Today, this year, how much of the contingency have we used?
It's a question I asked myself today, but
Of the general contingency?
it's actually a number I thought about today, but I didn't get time to look it up. But I think Linda can find that with some time.
Can I ask a question while they look that up, Tom?
Absolutely, Jim.
Just so I,
Please.
so based on the RTM past budget, the contingency amounts 585
That is the contingency that's
Right.
kind of available.
right now.
Correct.
Okay,
All right?
thank you.
That's what I asked, and I assume that's what Mr. Mayor answered. All right.
And that's made up of the $300,000, what it was called, regular contingency,
Plus the
plus the
285.
$285 of additional contingency that the RTM didn't cut, of what the Board of Finance put in.
Correct.
Okay.
Another question for you. Well, I want to know the answer to that one first, the other contingency. Also, how much are we adding in the RTM approved budget? I lost track. How much are we setting aside to add to the general fund balance? So the contribution to the general fund.
The budget is, do I know that number?
What do you, I don't understand what that,
I'm just asking.
500, I think it's 538,000.
Fair enough. No, that's just the amount we budgeted to add to the general fund to keep up with the increase
Correct.
in expense, that's all. That's the only reason I asked for it.
Yeah, I just
that's
wasn't.
otherwise known as contribution as surplus?
Contribution to surplus, contribution to the general fund.
Yep.
That's exactly right.
Mr. Mayor, the $2.1 billion shortfall for 18, you said that's new information? Because last I heard, I mean, I realize it changes by the day, was 1.7, so something changed in the last couple days?
The April 15th tax revenue, and they try to get it all counted by the end of the month, was considerably less than anticipated. I think it was $450 million less than anticipated
That
for
number
this
was
year.
known last week.
Well, it was
It was reported last week.
yeah, because Friday,
Of last week.
right.
Right,
Yeah.
not within the last few days. It was
Well,
reported last
Friday,
week.
that's, well, to me, that's last few days.
So
So
the question-
whatever, yeah. So that's, but when we were building the budget and building our, it was, but yes,
Right.
but it would have been known when the RTM met.
Right.
All right.
And I don't know if it was Friday or Monday or Tuesday when they came out with the extrapolation of that into the future years. The 450 was known, but I think the impact on 18 and 19 might not have been
Right.
Until this week, but I won't swear to that.
I thought I heard it was
Did you read that as-
$1.8 million
It's one-
last Friday
yeah,
or something.
Yeah, I don't.
But that might have been the press calculating it as
Yeah.
opposed to,
Okay.
is it-
Yeah.
I heard 1.8 million last Friday. Billion.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. But I heard that last Friday, but it could have been a press extrapolating out as opposed
Yeah,
to.
and now
the
it's
full-
2.1 billion and 2.9.
Okay.
So what you heard last week is now 300,000 higher.
I thought I read it. Do you have it for what the contingency is? Okay. Any other questions before I turn it back over to Mr. Mayor? Mr. Becker?
Just on the pile cleanup expense, that's our portion estimated, or how are we getting there? Is that assuming if we took the entire hit?
That's, the pile is, like this big, and it's, part of it needs to be cleaned
like
up
this
because there's.
It's only that big?
Yeah.
That shouldn't be 200,000.
And
They made it
part-
seem like it was
Part of it
bigger.
has some hazardous waste in there. This is the current and the latest and bid resulted estimate to clean up that hazard waste piece,
The full estimate.
the full estimate.
To Mr. Becker's point, that's
Right.
assuming we bear all the costs.
Yeah, either we will or the other party will.
No, but the bids came in at, bids were a lot higher than 200,000.
No, well, actually, the bids are like 192
Right.
to like 220,
Okay.
and there will be about, if that's all that we need to clean up, there'd be
As
about
alternates.
there'd be about another 20,000 town cost in there.
Okay.
So we're actually, this is understated a little bit. It'd actually be like 220 to 225
When everything's all.
when everything's all in. And then the remainder of the pile, they're going to use a substantial portion of it to create some berms and down at the, down in the beach area. So after that, I don't know if that's all going to be used, but I don't have any.
Yeah, so this
Yeah,
pad
that's
some
the future.
for
That would be a
ability
true
and that's what I was
unknown
getting at.
future event, yes.
Okay. All right,
Any-
perfect. Thank
Any other questions for Mr. Mayor at this point? I'm sorry to cut you off, but I just wanted to
No.
get clarification.
No
So
problem.
go ahead.
That's what we're here for. So going to Schedule D then, it's got 5 numbers on it. We do this every year. We got the middle number is the reserve for uncollectibles that's in the budget. I have no problem with that number. I think it's a very reasonable number. That gives us the 145, and impact on the medium homeowner is $129. Medium appraised value, approximately $500,000. Medium assessed value, approximately
So
$350,000.
we have no issues with the collection rate at this point?
I have no issues with the collection rate.
Okay.
And I'd like to also make some further comments, actually, if I may, to follow up, Mr. Chair, on comments that you've made in prior meetings
Yep.
regarding our efforts required by the town for the future. First, I'd like to start off by commending the town bodies for coming to a 1.4% tax increase. I'm sure the residents are most appreciative of that. I think it also has to be known and understood by all that this tax increase was achieved by using all the town's county reserves, scheduling a tax sale to collect 85% of the outstanding delinquent real estate taxes and interest, deferring certain paving and capital replacement costs, reducing staff, both temporary and permanent. The use of these one-time savings will not be available next year. Hence, we potentially face a significant tax increase next year without action. Before any normal operational budget increases, we are facing a minimum cliff of approximately $8 million. This by itself would require approximately a 3% budget increase and does not include any potential reductions that may come in state aid or expense pushed down from the state. Next year, as we look at budget savings, it should be noted that savings can only be achieved with our expenditures. Approximately 60% or $172 million of our budget is BOE related, excluding BOE debt. 20% or $60 million approximately is debt and non-operational and semi-fixed costs, including such items as OPEB and pension. 30 million or 10% is public safety. and 10% is for other operations, including 5% for Public Works at about $15 million, 1% at Parks and Rec, 1.2%, $3.6 million for the library, and other operations, which includes 16 different departments, 5% or $15 million.
So, Mr. Mayor, a couple questions on that. Do people mind if I ask a question on that? All right, the $8 million, can you give us a breakdown of what makes up the cliff, just so that we have the details?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have a handout, or are you just going to have to read it?
No, I do not. I did not bring copies or handouts. I'm sorry. The largest item, and the only one that really requires a little bit of an explanation, we have a tax collection
Prior year tax
scheduled,
Yeah.
which we currently have $7.2 million total delinquent taxes and interest combined. The budget has $6 million budgeted, which leaves $1 million left.
Okay.
All right. So in our normal tax year, prior year taxes and liens, we budget around $3.5 million. Well, we're only going to have $1 million in the bucket. And if we do that, and when you have a tax sale to, for people to, I'm not sure what the right word is, but to satisfy the tax sale, they need to pay their taxes current. So we won't be, so the people that don't pay their taxes on a regular basis will not be able to not pay their taxes next year. So the prior year tax balance will not build up.
Right.
So instead of the $1 million, the $3 million that we normally get in our budget every year for prior year taxes, we'll only get approximately $1 million to $1.2 million or $3 million is what I'm anticipating. So when you take the $6 million now minus the $1 million, there's a $5 million difference.
Well, the only comment to that, though, and I understand how you did it. That's $5 million you put in?
Yes, sir.
The only comment is, what you're not taking into consideration there is the stuff that doesn't get collected in 2017. Because you have a reserve for uncollectible for 2017.
My 7.2 is current. If it's late in the first quarter, it's already in that list. If it's late in the second quarter, it's already in that list.
Okay. So when I look at the uncollectible, you have 3.9 million for the full year in 2017.
Yeah, we're not going to, you mean for our current budget?
For current budget.
Yeah, we're not going to hit that, but yes.
Okay, what do you mean you're not going to hit that?
We're not collecting we're under budget on the prior year tax collections.
Okay, no, I understand. I guess what I'm saying is, you're saying basically our collection rate is going to be 98.58%. You're not saying it, we're all saying it, right? And in order to hit that 98.58%, that means that you're saying there's going to be $3.9 million of 2017 taxes, 2018 taxes, that are not going to be collected in the fiscal year 2018. It's the definition of a reserve.
The tax collection, yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is
about
you're
percent is $4.5 million.
Right. So you're saying, hey, going into the year, I only got $7 million that's uncollected. I'm saying I'm going to collect $6 million of it. Right? That's what you're saying right now. Right? So I'm only going to have $1 million that I can collect from 2016 backwards. Right? Because that's what the $1 million is. Then you're going to have $3.9 million from 2017 or 2018 that's not going to be collected. I screwed that up. Right? From 2017 and backwards, it's $1 million. Then you're saying within the fiscal year 2018, I'm estimating that we're going to have uncollectible accounts right now of $3.9 million. So I'm really going to have a bucket at the end of fiscal year 2018, going into fiscal year 19, of $4.9 million that I can collect on. Now, I'm not saying you're going to collect all that, right? And as we just saw, we write off some. So you obviously are not going to collect all that. But to say we're going to have a $6 million or $5 million hole, we might not quite have that much, because it's not like you're just going to have that $1 million to collect from. You're going to have, say, $4.5 million.
I totally follow your logic, and I agree with it. The other side of that is, which may mean that we could increase the collection rate this year. Because when we have, because this is just recent thinking, when we have that tax sale, one of the requirements of a tax sale is you have to come current.
Right, right. And I'm not saying.
So that may improve our collectible, which would
Right.
make less available. But yeah.
Right.
So, but to follow your numbers, then that 5 million would be like 4 million or 3.7 million or something like that.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. So I'm not arguing the fact that we're going to
Right.
have a cliff.
Right.
I'm arguing that it might not be as steep as you're saying.
I don't think you're arguing. I think you're properly discussing.
Right. Fair enough. Right?
Yes.
Okay. Good. What else is in that $8 million?
Loss of GE property,
Yep.
$392,000. Now, we will have a bond sale this year, and who knows where interest rates are, the way interest, with the higher interest rates are, the less premium you get from a bond sale.
Right.
So I have not forecast any bond sale revenue potential.
Okay.
But
How much is in there this year again?
we're using all but, I think, $250,000, and we're using $800,000 this year.
800,000. Okay.
We had an accrued salary reserve, I mean, this is in.
Yep.
Of $919,000. And then what's also included in the cliff is bringing up to normal operational numbers, the paving. So I put $1 million in for that. There's 3 trucks for $540,000, and library materials for $200,000.
Right. So that $8 million is an all-inclusive number.
Except for state activity.
cuts. Right. Okay.
Right. And then on top of that, also on top of the $8 million, you're going to have the contribution to surplus requirement for the 7 or 8 million, whatever the number
Right.
is.
Okay.
Yeah.
And no state aid cut.
And no state aid cut.
No state aid cut. Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Now,
Thank you.
Now, if you have a state aid cut, let's say it's $1 million this year, and let's say it's $1.6 million next year, then that's like, then you got $1.6 million plus $1 million plus $1.6 million twice.
Right. Thank you.
So that's not included in the 8.
Correct. There's no state activity included
The
in this.
8 is all town-based, nothing.
So then that would be-
Semi-known, town-based.
That would get it up to 11.6.
Yes.
But the 8 is overstated a little bit. But go ahead, Chris.
Yeah.
So
No,
the 11.6 would be a little overstated.
Yeah, what I have is like, when I add everything in with the state and the double counting of the state for the
Yeah.
second year, it comes to like 12.8. So if you take out a couple million, you get down to like,
9 to
10 or
10 million.
11.
Mr.
And that's partially made up. We also will anticipate, I assume, some grand list increase. So you can take, 0.75 or something, which would be another, $1 million or $1.5 million.
Right. So your nut there, and Mr. DeWitt, I'm going to get to you, is somewhere between 8 and 10 million, all in.
Correct.
Mr. DeWitt?
I think you've answered it, but the 12.8 with the state would is factoring in the pension, the teacher?
No.
No?
I've ignored that totally.
Okay.
The latest
So
rumors.
12.8 without even having to,
Yeah.
assuming we're not paying anything into the state teacher's
Right,
pension.
yeah, and I don't even want to
And
go there.
and what was, I'm just trying to remember what that number would have been. That was a
Well, that
significant
was-
number.
The original number was 9 million, since you asked. Some of the later scuttlebutt is they're no longer going to require towns to pay 1/3 of the total balance.
Right.
But maybe pay the normal cost, the annual normal cost, which if they did 100% of that, it would be 5 million. If they did 33% of that, it'd be $1.7 million.
Wait, what is that? For what?
For a 1-year cost?
For the normal cost, instead of, the 9 million
For the
was based
pension.
upon
For-
the
yeah, I'm
unfunded
just asking
liability,
about
the
that
whole
number
with the pension.
33% of the total.
So they're not saying, so that's if they don't go backwards, that's what your normal cost on an annual basis. We'll take
Right.
it,
so
the
you
state
have
will
to-
take care
Right,
of it.
yeah, that's some of the scuttlebutt that's out there.
Okay. Mr.
Okay,
DeWitt, anything
got it.
else?
No, that's it.
Mr. Walsh?
Did you put any numbers in here? Because I know at the Board of Selectmen level, they put, refresh my memory of this term that I think Mr. Bateson was using, hold. They weren't going to fund it, but they were going to fund it next year for two positions, one in conservation and one in library. What was that term called?
Vacation hold. Excuse me,
Vacancy hold.
yeah, I'd like to go on vacation hold
So
myself.
they plan on bringing those two positions back. So we have
Those
to.
are included in my numbers.
Those are included in your
Yes, sir.
numbers. Okay. In those numbers of the now 12.8, where do we stand for the additional monies for like increases to salaries next year? Like, the Board of Ed gets 3.4% increases every year, and the town side, the certain unions get increases, and then we have insurance goes up by, 7% or whatever that is. If we added, what would be that additional amount?
I would just,
If you know it.
yeah, no. If you take my full numbers, and I agree with Mr. Flynn's comments, that
So it might be a couple
Okay.
million and a half
but
below
take
that.
the full numbers, if you then adjust that downward, if you assume that maybe there's a grand list increase of, say, 0.75%, which would save us about 2.7 million, and then you add in what would be your normal operating budget on top of that, you would, and I haven't fully flushed this out, but you would end up probably with the totals approximately a little over 6% budget increase.
Well, no, that's not, let's do this a different way, right?
Okay.
Let's take, would you accept if the 12.8, let's say that's 10 million,
Okay.
all right? The
That's 2.8% less?
Okay, so let's say,
2.8 million?
let's say that's, right,
10 million would be, what, 3.4%?
right, let's say that's 10 million, right? And that takes care of the cliffs from this year, and it takes care of adding back some extraordinary items that were pushed this year, correct?
Correct.
Okay. If you look at the budget increase this year, right, which funded the salaries and all that kind of stuff, and I'm not, right, that budget increase is $5 million. So if you take the 10, right, isn't it $5 million? Or no, what's the budget increase? I'm sorry, because the number I took was the current year tax levy increase.
Do you have that town sheet? You have that sheet?
Hmm? I don't think so, but
Just look at-
basically, what's the spending
Just look
increase
at-
this year?
look at The Board of Ed is 5 million.
Yeah, I knew I had the
Right.
wrong number.
One below it is the total increase for the town.
Yeah, the total increase for the town and Board of Ed this year with is $5 million.
It
Town
is
and
5
Board of Ed
Huh?
combined, yes.
Okay. So if you look at that, then you're looking at, to Mr. Walsh's point, you're looking at extraordinary items, town-based of 10 million. You're looking at, if nothing else changes, normal course kind of increases, to Mr. Walsh's point. Salary increases, insurance increases, all else being considered, of 5 million. So you're at 15 million. Then, that doesn't count in state aid if that gets reduced, to your earlier point, correct?
Correct.
And it doesn't include whether that 5 million, whether there's some things that were cut out of there, right? But the state aid, if they cut it this year, right, we're only getting like $6 million from them now. Right?
You have 5.
I thought it was 7. You listed
5.
5. All right. So say they take half of that. That's 2.5 million next year. That's 17.5 million. I'm just trying to get
Yeah,
to your
this is-
all-in bucket, that's all.
Yeah, well, yeah, obviously 17 million is
I don't know
is
whether
close to 6%.
It's like 4.5%, isn't it?
6%?
Yeah.
No, it's yeah, because you're basically saying, it's basically 5 million is 1.7, so 17 is, 1.7 times 3,
Yeah,
plus some more, so it's like 5.5 to 6%.
5.2, 5.1, right?
Oh, my
And
God.
the 1.7 is low because it's not a normal funding. So normal funding would be higher than the 1.7.
Right,
Yeah. So we're both in that 6% range.
right. And, I mean, hence that comes up to the comments that I made, I believe, on behalf of the board. They weren't just my comments. But when we voted on the budget, was the fact of the matter is, any way you slice it, it doesn't get any better in other years, and we've run out of runway. So we need fundamental structural change across all departments of government and all commissions and boards in this town in the next 9 months for new revenue streams, more efficient operations, and a review of all our services in order to reduce this number, or else going in, let's say for grins, we're looking at 4 to 6%. Is that a fair comment?
I would say that your 4 to 6% is low. I would
Okay.
say 5 to 6.5
Okay.
without a big state any.
Questions, comments, concerns from board members?
And then the only other comment I'd make is, also, as I tried to point out, you can only get savings, significant savings, where you have significant expenditures.
Understand.
Yeah.
Understand. I mean, what you're not saying, but what you're saying is Board of Education,
Yeah, right.
right?
I didn't say that.
Okay, but I mean,
No, I
it's-
just,
What is the
You
big
know,
percent of all the numbers
yeah,
you add
that's-
up?
You know, one
What's
of-
the big
right.
percent?
You got Board of Ed is 60%, you get 20%, which is almost non-touchable if you talk
Right.
about the OPEB, the RTM, the electricity, and all that kind of stuff, the pension, and you have public safety at 30 million, and yes,
the
exactly.
current economic model is unsustainable for the citizens of the town. And we need to start working on adjustments to that model now. And that was one of the things this board tried to do during this budget process, was buy time to allow that effort to take place so that those things could be done before hitting valuable services, whether it be DPW or whether it be in the classroom. I mean, that's what we've been trying to do, is say everything's got to be on the table, and we need enough time, or the department heads need enough time
Right.
to be able to look at this to minimize
Right.
the service level impacts.
Correct. And as I stated at the beginning of my comments, my purpose here was to follow up and put some numbers to your more general comments.
Thank you, sir, for that. I didn't know you were going to do that. Mr. Becker?
So two things. One, just wanted to circle back on one of the questions about this vacancy hold, because it was originally more, not so much a Board of Selectmen term, but an administration term. So were those items, I think it was conservation and maybe somewhere else, those are included as well, not just a Board of
Yes, sir.
Selectmen?
One is,
So anywhere that either of them did whatever with that term, it's been
Then-
included? in
Yes,
your-
sir.
Okay, perfect. Also, just it's now been 5 weeks since the chairman's comments and this board met and made their votes. Has there been any headway on getting everyone together and kind of moving down that path? Because the way I look at it, we now have May and June, and then really, if people start checking out July and August, and we had asked for September to add our capital planning to also include the follow-up, knowing that within about 2 months, everyone's going to start getting their budgets in order. So it seems like a while out, but it really isn't.
I agree.
So I'm just wondering, has anything either happened the last 5 weeks, or is there a plan to kind of get that going and soon?
I don't know if
So we
Mr.
don't-
Tetreau wants to come up and make any comments on this.
Yeah,
I think it's
just-
very valid. No, let me say this.
Timeline.
No one has formally reported back. I know the Board of Education and the superintendent, I was lucky enough to, I was asked to moderate their public forum, and that topic did come up at their public forum, and they did indeed admit there needs to be work done on that.
Yeah.
But they didn't formally say, nor was it my place to ask, what they've done on it to date.
No, and a lot of it, I think, is going to fall on them, but I worry, especially the way summer always seems to go. So-
Yeah, no, it's a fair point. Mr. Tetreau?
Yeah, there have been, oh, is this on loud enough? There have been certainly some comments out in the social media about some things, but very specifically to your point, Mr. Flynn and I spent some time sitting down talking through just what that meant. We had a second follow-up conversation talking about that what we have to do is because in the comments that I've heard about structural change, and I'm just going to pick one comment out of social media that I'm not going to attribute to anybody. I'm not sure that you've probably seen variations on it, but it basically said, you know, the department heads need to go back, restructure what they're doing so we can get all these services for less money. And I think that there's the free lunch party that that may be difficult to do. So what I talked to Mr. Flynn about was getting together and setting some reasonable targets. What might restructuring accomplish? It just because we wanted to eliminate all increases doesn't mean it will eliminate all increases. There are, you know, you can restructure, and when you look at the type of town function, because we're a regulated industry to many degrees, to a certain degree, there are certain functions we have to provide, and certain functions we have to provide 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. A micro example of that would be if we have a lifeguard on the beach sitting in a chair from 8 in the morning till 6 at night. The lifeguard's there. It's hard to restructure that to make that lifeguard more efficient. We can close the beach and not have a lifeguard. We can consolidate lifeguard chairs and have fewer lifeguard chairs per mile of beach, assuming there's no safety impact there. But when one of the functions of the town is life safety, that becomes a significant issue. So part of what I talked to the chair about was saying, let's sit down and talk about what might be available from structural change. If we're increasing the budget, was it 15 million? The number you just used here.
Yeah, 17.5.
All right, let me use 15 just for discussion purposes.
I'd like you to use 10, but that's okay.
When we look at that 15 million, we can say restructure. That doesn't necessarily take 15 million to zero.
Yeah.
Does it take 15 million to 10 million? See, I got your 10.
Yeah.
Does it take 15 million to 7.5 million? What might be possible? And then over what time frame might that be possible? One of the social media suggestions out there is, do we close a school in order to keep certain programs alive? But if we go to close that school, that's not going to happen overnight. That's not going to happen in 9 months, to the point earlier, even if we decided to start doing that next year. And certainly, as much as that idea was voiced, there was a lot of discussion on both sides of that idea. So that certainly from the school system standpoint. And in any business, as we're saying, if you're going to look at, as this board well knows, when 60% of your costs are in one budget, debt service is about another 10%, that's 70%. We've got public safety that we can't go to zero on in terms of another component. I'm going to argue a certain amount of public works budget is public safety. There are a number of functions there we cannot eliminate, and we may be able to marginally improve those. But we need, at some point, yes, we need to get the Board of Ed on board to see what we can get out of that 60%. Structurally, you know, on the town side, you look at all the different functions, and as I think I said the other night at the RTM meeting, when you go through everything we do, the town has 3 big departments in terms of police, fire, and DPW. Certainly some challenges in terms of major reductions in those. We have a series of smaller departments, the tax collector, the assessor, the health department, which frankly is mostly nurses for the schools, and we can go through human resources and such for that. And then we have 2 of the bigger departments in terms of Parks and Rec and the library, and those are 2 of the optional ones. We don't have to have a library at all. We don't have to have a Parks and Rec function. Now, it is part of our values, part of the amenities. Those are extremely good programs. It's part of why we live here, so I am certainly not against those 2 functions. But when you get down to what you're not required to do as a town, and I think part of the discussion was what services do we provide and how do we provide them. Yep. And certainly there are a number of programs on the Parks and Rec part of our program that pay for themselves. So we can eliminate those, but that doesn't accomplish anything because we lose revenue and expense. So then you come back to, I think as we pointed out here, and I'm going to pick on the golf course, one can argue we shouldn't be in the golf course business. On the other hand, it's not a drain on expenses because we're covering our nugget there.
Exactly.
Including capital. And again, I think at the request of this board a few years back, we looked at an comprehensive P&L that included operational
We still get
expense
it.
as well as some capital expense in there. So we can say, look at that and say, we can eliminate the golf course. It's just not going to save us any money. So it's going back and looking at where we can achieve, might be able to achieve some savings and what the range of those might be. And that's what the chairman and I decided we would sit down and take a look at and start that discussion to set some reasonable targets. So what you don't want to do is go through this process and have everybody say, well, you should have done more. Well, at some point, there's only so much more. What's the bogey? What's your budget? What's your target in terms of what might be possible? And certainly when we start to look at other towns, we start to look at things that will make a difference.
Can I ask you a
Go ahead.
question? Because, I heard you the other night talking about the library and Parks and Rec as being two of the areas we don't legally have to provide services for. So those might be a way, if you were stuck this year, let's not even get into this year, but that numbers are not big enough to solve this $17 or $15 million problem. Even if you closed, and I agree with you, I'm not into closing the library. I think it's an amenity that this town and it's a sign to society that we respect libraries and knowledge.
One of the functions
and
that
things like
serves
that.
citizens of all ages.
Exactly. But the total cost for the library is only like $3.75 million.
You're freaking close. Excuse my language. Yes.
Yeah, it's not really moving the needle on $15 million.
Well,
So
well,
to me, for the first, I think everyone's going to have to get their hands around that any solution to this in savings or, I guess, tax increases or some combination of both is probably going to have to involve the Board of Education.
yeah.
And we got to be honest about it because I think there's other bodies out there that say they don't want to touch that. But when we're staring this number in the face of what's going to happen next year, I think everything's got to be on the table.
Well, and Jim, to follow up on your point, I don't mean to interrupt if Mr. Tetreau wanted to say something, but that's why it's so important to give a lead time. Because although we're heavily involved in the budgets, right, the Board of Education should have forgotten more about their budget than we know. So the people that should be driving that process on that side are the administration of the Board of Education as well as the Board of Education. And I would argue on the Parks and Rec side, it should be that Park and Rec Commission that is looking at the fees and the way they go about the services and field utilization, just like in DPW. It should be Mr. Michelangelo working with his crew. By giving 9 months or so, and you're right, it's not a heck of a lot of a period of time, but it's more than trying to do it at a budget table in March, where you sit there and say, do you really need that person, or can you do without, that English or that whatever program, French, I don't know, pick one. That shouldn't be our role. We should be driving now and saying, the appropriate people should be looking at these questions right now and making sure that they do it in the appropriate way so that we're not making on-the-fly decisions without accurate information or full information.
And I think it's important for everybody to understand, and as much as this board has helped publicize it and help drive the priority, it's not that the department heads haven't done any of this in the past. You've seen it here when we've combined positions between building and zoning, driven by the department heads to do that. We've made changes on the Parks and Rec side to get more people involved in field maintenance and more of the programs that come in place. Each department head has been making improvements in their area as we've gone through this. So we're not starting from, based on how you want to look at this, we're not starting from zero. And that's why I talked to the chair about setting realistic targets for what we think structural changes can be. Because a certain amount we've already achieved. A lot of the low-hanging fruit we've already taken back. And I think as you heard me talk at the RTM, I talked about the next level of efficiency might be between departments, and that may be some efficiencies between, and as well as efficiencies between the town and the Board of Ed in terms of looking at consolidating some operations and some programs there, and also between our town and other towns. I think if you look within the assessor's office, they have X number of people. If we cut the staff in half, and I am not proposing that just for the record, but if we cut the staff in half, you're only going to save so much. They don't take up that much real estate, and there's only so many bodies there. So just going to that and saying, let's save one body, isn't going to affect the structural, that's not a structural change that we're going to get to. So I think there's levels of the game, if you will, that we have to take a look at. And we certainly, one of the exercises that I'm asking the department heads to do, and I will ask them this next week so they don't know this entirely yet, at least not everybody does, I've mentioned to a couple of them, is that I'm going to ask them to go out and pick 3 towns that do, not the same towns, but where their department is known to do a good job, and look at what that department does. What do they do better than us? How many people do they have? What's their budget? What functions they do that we don't, and what functions perhaps we do that they don't? Are they organized differently? Because one of the things you see certainly in areas like conservation, parks and rec, and to some degree public works, different towns are organized differently. In some towns, parks and rec has a serious public works component as attached to that. In some towns, there isn't a conservation group directly. It's sorted out differently than that. So I think we need to look at that. I'm not sure any of those areas is necessarily better. I know they're different. But the question is, do they allow for different combination of job functions that allow for less to take place? One of the things that is talked about in the CCM meetings I go to is, you know, on a regional basis, do we consolidate assessors' offices? So when you think Fairfield, you say, no, we've got an assessor, we've got a group there, but across other towns, do 169 towns each need an assessor, which they do today? When you look at ECC, Emergency Call Center, 911 Center, you know, can we consolidate with other towns so we get some economies of scale from a broader base than that? So then when I talk about looking with other towns, there may be some functions like that that can be done. So when you look at, and when you talk about 911 centers, we've got 169 towns in Connecticut, and I think we probably have 150 911 call centers. California has a few more people than we do in the state of Connecticut. They have 5. 5 911 centers for the state of California. All right. So when we talk about, we have to look beyond just what we're doing here and how we look at small towns. So some of that, I'm going to suggest it's not fair to look at a department head and say you should know what's going on in all 50 states and see what else has taken place, and look at where you can merge with other departments or how we might combine those for efficiency. So I think that's one of the levels we've got to go above and beyond what the department heads are able to do in their town. And I think that, you know, that's where, frankly, this year has been a little frustrating in terms of, I know I shared the CCM report, Making a Difference, with some of you, that talked about revenue diversification on one hand, but it also talked about shared services on the other. And one of the things we talked about was getting some changes in regulations at the state level to allow us to look at how we merge some of those functions and how we work with unions to merge those, not to eliminate collective bargaining, but rather than if you're trying to merge 5 towns or several towns into either some shared fire services or shared ECC, that you don't have to negotiate with 5 different unions, that in fact the unions will pick one union or pick a coalition to do the negotiation, so it's one negotiation to affect that change. That got buried in committee and lost. Now it may come back, because as you all know, we're not done yet, but at the moment it doesn't look like it's going anywhere, and that kind of ability to help. We didn't use the words regionalization in that report because we thought that had some negative connotations. We used the word shared services for combining and consolidating functions between towns, and some of that's in Fairfield, but in other towns around here we're looking at, can we collectively do that?
Thank you, Mr. Tetreau. We've done a lot on, Mrs. Marmon, we've done a lot on the future. Let's allow one more because you didn't have an opportunity.
So I guess these are some interesting ideas, but given the timeliness, given the urgency of the situation, has there been thought to pull together representatives, for example, from the Board of Ed or from the Board of Finance, other boards and department heads, people in town, to put together a working group to look at this and put forth a plan so that it's a little bit more, obviously the department heads working, that sounds good, but really to get a working party together to look at the scope of this from a more holistic standpoint.
Yes, from a standpoint, are there plans in place to do that? No. Are there thoughts in place to do that? Absolutely. The first step was to get the department heads looking at other towns to see what best practices are and see what we collect, because that we can also implement quicker if it's within the department and affect some change. Also will help them to see how other towns are organized and what we can bring back here and start to do that. The conversations with Mr. Flynn and myself resolved around taking a look from a broad base at the budget. Initially we were going to sit down, then we're going to bring in a few more people into it. But first thing is just sit back, look at the numbers and say, okay, what's possible? You know, we're not going to save $5 million in the tax assessor's office. What's possible? What can we do, and what are the likely priorities? Then start to bring in progressively more people to add to that discussion. So exactly right. So we get more people involved, we get more thinking involved, but it's going to have to be everybody's buy-in. And the challenges to do major structural change in 9 months is not easy. We want to get every dollar we can, so we get as close to that as we can. So the idea is, as always, take the low-hanging fruit first, take those things that are simpler, and anything within a department we can do, or within a couple of departments, great, but then we have to look beyond that, and the bigger savings take more time.
So, and I think that sounds great. I would probably say if we could formalize all of those people coming together, it would seem to make sense, and to do it sooner than later.
Yeah.
That's all, because all of this information, rather than coming in silos, if it could come into a central place where we could look at the scope of it, just formalizing it is what I'm saying.
No, well point. I mean, we had a couple conversations, and obviously there have been a number of things going on in the past few weeks that have made it harder to focus on this. But now that we're at this point, both in the year and in the budget cycle, and with a few other things out of the way, I think it will make more progress on that.
Thank you, Mrs. Marmon. Anybody else? Okay. We've seen the calculation. We've seen the risk. We've seen what the future looks like, perhaps, that needs to be managed. We're not giving into it. We're saying that all things being equal, that's what it means. We've heard that the collection rate is stable, and you're comfortable with the collection rate. What else do we want to know about the mill rate? Absolutely, Mr. Mottola.
I guess I'm going to open this topic up and like to know what everyone's thought is. I think one of the reasons this board added $1 million and change to the contingency account was we wanted some flexibility. We knew we were going to have some issues with the state going forward. Some of us wanted to even add more because we were generally concerned. And I think part of the thinking was we anticipated this fiscal cliff next year, and this maybe was going to ease it a little bit. And so I guess I'd like a discussion about whether this board, we're here to set the mill rate, whether we want to set a mill rate, I'm going to throw it out there, based on how we voted on March 30th? The last time we met, I think, was March 30th.
Right.
I think we have the authority to do so, and I understand what the RTM did, and I unfortunately wasn't there that night, but I heard the comments from the chairman and you, Mr. Walsh, also, and they were really well taken, and I appreciate what you said that night, both of you. So I'm throwing that out there for discussion.
I will, I'm happy to address that directly. I understand the sentiment that you raise. And I've thought about this over the last few days because other people have asked me privately. about this. Let me be clear. I was not happy with the vote of the RTM. That is their budget. It's not the budget that we forwarded to them. But that is the process that this town governs by. And in years past, when additional information has been available to us after the RTM voted, most notably collection rates or issues with motor vehicle tax 1 year and things like that, this board has adjusted the mill rate for additional information. The fact of the matter is, all of this information was very well known to the RTM. The risks, as you point out, were discussed. Mr. Walsh, myself, Mr. Tetreau, a couple others, Mr. Mayor, pointed everything out. So this, to do it in this manner when everything was known and it was a well-educated decision that they made, I have a hard time with that because that disrespects that body. And it disrespects the process that we go through. So I understand the sentiments, and I'm not thrilled with how it worked out, but the process is more important in this instance than that. And I don't want to disrespect another town body or their decision. They're last in this process for a reason. And our job is to recommend a budget to them. But they're the legislative body, and they approve that budget. And I just would have a hard time doing anything that disrespects that process that's been in place, I want to say over 300 years, but I don't know that to be true.
Let's go with 70.
Yeah, for a very long time. And I wouldn't want people doing that to me. And I don't want to do that to somebody else. And to me, the precedent is just as important. And at the end of the day, what they did, as much as I don't like it, it was $825,000 on a close to $300 million budget. That's just my opinion.
And I appreciate what you're saying, and I've lived here my whole life. I understand the process.
Well, I know you do. I'm not-
No, I didn't mean it that way. And in fact, I understand the process and had to go look at the state statutes to remind myself whether we even had the authority to do this, which I think we do, if we wanted to. I think the public needs to understand that we could do that if we wanted to. The one thing I would differ, and I say this all with due respect, when you say it was a well-educated decision by the RTM, it wasn't a well-educated decision. It was, in my opinion, a very irresponsible decision on their part.
It was well-educated in that all the information was out there. All the information was presented. Reasonable people can disagree. It's not as though the fiscal issues at the state weren't known on Monday night. They were well known. They were discussed. So the information was available, and they reached a different decision. And it was their decision to make. They set the budget. Anybody else? Mr. Walsh?
And John, I hear you because I have the same thoughts have gone through my head. I mean, I've thought about it. I mean, clearly from the analysis that Mr. Mears put forward with showing that we're going to have to either find $17.5 million of fresh cash next year or cuts or a combination of both. There's not enough money in this budget. There just isn't. And it's a risky budget. It's not my budget. It's the RTM's budget. They've chosen to go with this budget. We explained what the financial risks were, till we were almost blue in the face. But in the end, I think we got to respect it. They're hoping for a Hail Mary from the state. We'll see whether they get it or not. After we set the mill rate tonight, we'll all sit back and wait to see what happens. If they're wrong, there's either going to be one, a supplemental tax bill, or two, cut in services, as Mr. Tetreau explained a little bit.
Or a combination
or
of both.
a combination of both. I know personally I won't be looking to take any money out of our fund balance. I know I will not do that. I'll say that right here. I will not do that. I mean, look at how much we're going to have to come up with fund balance next year on this $17.5 million in new money. I mean, it's a lot of fund balance to add next year. A lot. That's going to be almost $1.7 million.
Well, though, in fairness, some of that's going to be replacing lost revenue, not an increase in expense, and it's only the increase in expense that adds to the fund balance, not the replacement of revenue. Just so that we're...
Maybe $1 million. It's
Could
going to
be, I
it's
mean-
going to be a large number.
It's going to be larger than you would want.
Yeah.
Let's just put it that way.
I'd rather be throwing that $1 million at something else.
Right.
But, you know, I thought about the same thing you're talking about, but I don't want to disrespect the program. If at the end of the process, for me, I kind of am resigned to respecting their vote, following them down this, taking this risk with them, walking this risk, their risk. And if it's wrong, and we have to come to the table next year, and they put us at financial risk that came to pass the way we said it was, I might be more inclined next year to do something. But I think at this point, I'm kind of with Mr. Flynn, sometimes a little bit reluctantly, because I wasn't happy, but hey, it was their vote, and I'm going to respect it, and we'll have to figure it out along the way.
Anybody else have anything to add? Seeing none, I'm going to call for the vote. Mr. Mayor, can you help me with the wording here?
Well, I can give you the number. It's
Give me the number and I'll do the wording. How's that?
25.82.
Okay, so we're going to make a motion to set the mill rate for fiscal year 2018 for the town of Fairfield at 25.82. Do I have a second to that motion? We'll take Mr. Becker. Questions, comments, anything else? Seeing none, all in favor of setting the mill rate at 25.82 for the next fiscal year? Those opposed? Abstentions? The item carries unanimously. Once again, I want to thank this board for its deliberative nature. I think we have very good discussions. I'm very proud to be among you, and I think I'm very proud of the work that we do and how we go about our work. So thank you for that. I'm going to ask for a 5-minute recess. It's
Can I just ask
almost 9
one
o'clock.
thing, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, you can, Mr. Walsh.
Some of these numbers are kind of a bit scary, and we kind of went through them. And,
Yep.
and I was wondering whether Mr. Mayor and his staff, over the next several months, there's nothing urgent, can maybe start developing a model that we can kind of look at as we go forward over the next year, only because it's just so dramatic.
Can I say something to that? Number one, I agree. But number two, I have more of a sense of urgency because I think it'll drive the process of looking at reducing our expenses. Because as, you know, Mr. Tetreau and I have had brief conversations in the last week about this, and coming up with a bogey that would help drive what the overall bogey is, and then dividing it out by department as to what one. So I think it's an excellent
And as the
idea.
state makes their decisions along the way, things can adjust and
Correct.
whatever.
Correct.
And
So,
maybe we
Mr.
can
Mayor,
get presented once a month at one of our meetings.
that'd be great. I agree. Thank you for that. And with that, I am going to ask for a 5-minute recess. All right? Thank you, everybody. Jerry, you all set? Welcome back, everybody. We're going to go back into session, and we're going to, we've gone a little out of order tonight, but we're going to go to item number 4, to hear, consider, and approve the appointment of auditors for fiscal year 2017. You'll recall that our audit firm for the past several years, Mr. Sanafani, our audit partner, that firm decided to leave the municipal sector of auditing. Mr. Sanafani did go with a different firm, and we decided this would be the appropriate time to put the audit out for bid, which we do periodically to make sure we get competitive rates, as well as it's always a good thing to keep your auditors on their toes. It had nothing to do with us being upset or concerned about the work. With that being said, I'm going to turn this over to the chairperson of our audit committee, Mrs. Leclerc, and Mr. Mayor, the chief fiscal officer, who ran the process. So whoever wants to speak to it first, go right ahead.
I'll just, Bob did all the work and put it out to bid with the purchasing director. We saw the RFP before it went out, and they submitted it and posted it. And as I understand it, they only got 2 responses, which we reviewed both responses, and it really seemed like an obvious choice to us. And so I guess from there, Bob can explain the process a little bit more thoroughly.
I think you did it pretty completely, Ms. LeClaire. But yeah, we went out to bid. Didn't get as many bids as we'd hoped for.
Why was that, Mr. Mayor? Was it out there long enough? Was it too specific? Anytime I hear that we only get a couple of bids, it kind of concerns me. One was from like
yeah,
Maine,
no, it's
right?
I think there's a resource issue in the audit firms that do municipal auditing. That is the main reason. Because I did, talk to a couple of people, talk to a couple of firms, and just don't have the resources. In fact, I got a little bit concerned because Mr. Sanafani, who went over to, what's the name of the firm? I don't remember. It's PK.
Well, O'Connor Davies.
O'Connor Davies, thank you. Yeah, because a lot of people, because all of the Cohen-Resnick firms went out to bid, because Cohen-Resnick
went out,
okay, so people bid on things, and I got concerned that Cohen, that the new firm, Davis O'Connor, might not have the resources to do us. So, we tried to rush the thing out there, talk to Bloom Shapiro, and people just don't have the resources, and there's more work available than staff, and so I feel very good that we do have a bid from, from Mr. Sanafani's new firm, and we talked to some people there, and they seem real competent, and they know what they're doing, and so I think it'll work out fine.
So what is the recommendation?
To go with Cohen Day.
Go with the name of the firm first?
It's PKF O'Connor Davies, and the lead partner will be the same, Joe Centofanti, who has been doing our audit for the past, it's probably 6 years.
Yeah, and they're a national firm. They're major. They got, they're bigger than Cohen-Resnick.
Mr. Walsh, you had a question?
When you talked about resources, is it also the expertise in municipal accounting that's maybe some of the firms don't have?
Correct.
Okay.
There's also just in general, there's CPA firms have been struggling to get people for the last many years. They've changed the requirements, if anybody doesn't know. Now it's a 5-year degree.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's the CPA exam, so there's less people going into it and more demand, given Sarbanes-Oxley and all the other items that are out there. So, I mean, I don't know what you I haven't done the work that you did on it, but the answer doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any thoughts? Mr. Becker, did you have something?
Well, just one question. Though. So you guys, the audit committee met about this?
Just through emails. We didn't actually have to meet. Normally, we would meet and interview firms, but because there were only 2 proposals,
And you just decided, okay.
It really didn't call for it.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No.
Seeing none, Mrs. LeClaire, as chairperson, could you make the motion, please?
Okay. I make a motion that we approve PKF O'Connor Davies as our auditor for the fiscal year 2017, is it 17?
2017.
17-18.
17.
Okay. Do we have a second to that motion? Mr. Mottola, any other questions, comments, concerns? Real
quick, just
yeah, please.
and this is just administrative. When I was looking at the document you're supposed to sign,
Yeah, at the bottom.
it says Town of East
Yeah.
Hampton, not Fairfield. Just make sure that's
I
changed.
think there was a corrected one, right?
It was corrected.
Yeah.
I was
Okay.
looking at the one online. That
There
you
was
sent
one
us.
online. I noticed the same thing, yeah.
That's all.
Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? The item carries. Thank you for the work on that. Although it doesn't seem like it was too much work, given there were
No.
two.
Actually, we put a better damn good RFP.
All right. Item number 5, to hear To hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Director of Public Works. This is a long one. Whereas federal monies are available under the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Program administered by the State of Connecticut, Department Housing pursuant to Public Law 93-383 as amended, and whereas pursuant to Chapter 127C and Part 6 of Chapter 130 of the Connecticut General Statutes, the Commissioner of Housing is authorized to disperse such federal monies to local municipalities. And whereas it is desirable and in the public interest that the town of Fairfield accept and expend from the state a grant in the sum not to exceed an additional $47,500 for a total of $607,000 in order to undertake a community development block grant disaster recovery tranche 1 project, Pine Creek Culvert Upgrade, and to execute an assistance agreement, therefore, should one be offered. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the town of Fairfield is cognizant of the conditions and prerequisites for state assistance imposed by Part 6 of Chapter 130 of the Connecticut General Statutes, and that the acceptance of the town of Fairfield of a disaster recovery community development block grant to be used for the Pine Creek Culvert Upgrade in an amount not to exceed an additional $47,500 for a total of $607,500 is hereby approved, and further resolved that the First Selectman is hereby authorized on behalf of the town of Fairfield to accept and expend such grant, and further resolved that the First Selectman is hereby authorized on behalf of the town of Fairfield to execute any and all necessary documents to secure said grant. Do I have a motion to put that in front of us? I'm going to take Mrs. Marmion. I'll take Mr. DeWitt because I've ignored him a few times tonight. The item is now before us, and if you make me read it again, I shall shoot you. So let's go ahead. Welcome, Mr. Michelangelo. Welcome,
Thank you.
Mr. Hurley. Thank you for being here.
Joe Michelangelo, Director of Public Works. About 2 years ago, we were before this board. In the aftermath of Storm Sandy, one of the best sources of money was the from HUD and federal HUD and the state Department of Housing. There was a number of community development block grant disaster relief funds that were applied for and fortunate enough to receive. We were before you 2 years ago to accept a 100% grant for $560,000 to improve the culverts on Tide Gate, just located probably about 100 feet south of the fire training ground, just for orientation. During the bidding of the project, or after the bid of project and during the construction, there were some change orders, mainly dealing with the piling foundation system and a contingency which would cause the project to exceed the construction cost of $560,000. We brought this to Department of Housing's attention, and they did fund for 100%. They approved the funding for the additional funding of $47,000 to cover those additional expenses. So we were going along according to procedure. One of the things that Mrs. Bossi, the controller, pointed out, that even though it was great that we accepted the money, we still need to go before this board to have you formally accept the money. So that's all it is, to accept an additional $47,000 to bring the total of the grant to $607,500.
Thank you, Mr. Michelangelo. Are there any questions on this right now? Anybody have any questions? Oh, this is really just an update to something that we had approved previously.
Correct, additional funding.
All right, so if seeing none, I'm going to call for a vote on this item. Okay, so all in favor of the item as read to accept the $47,500 additional? As read, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Let's go to the next item. To hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Director of Public Works. Resolved that it is in the best interest of the town of Fairfield to enter into contracts with the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, and that is desirable and in the public interest that the town of Fairfield accept from the state a reimbursable grant in the sum of $30,000 for the Rooster River Flood Control Project study, and further resolved that the First Selectman is hereby authorized on behalf of the town of Fairfield to accept and expend such grant, and further resolved that the First Selectman is hereby authorized on behalf of the town of Fairfield to execute any and all necessary documents to secure said grant in connection with said contract and to execute any amendments, rescissions, and revisions thereto. Who's going to put this before us? take Mr. Hopkins. I'll take the second by Mr. DeWitt again. Welcome back, gentlemen.
Okay. Good evening. The Connecticut DEP and the town of Fairfield hired a consultant to produce a hydrologic study for the Rooster River back in 2003. The report detailed the hydrology, flood stage, water surface elevations, and conceptual improvements within the Rooster River floodplain. The lower portion of the watershed experienced significant flooding in the past, and it's in the Brentwood, Fairchild, and Commerce Drive neighborhoods that are close to the river. The original study investigated several options and mitigation concepts, including some dikes, pumping stations, additional drainage pipes, channel improvements, and combining bridges to help reduce flooding in these neighborhoods. The purpose of this project request is to update the 2003 report and revise any improvements and update the information. The watershed has experienced significant development in the region, and updating the report will reflect these changes. Since 2003, the state has also revised the rainfall data for the state, as rainfall intensities have increased over previous models, and updating this data will result in a more accurate model for the region. If a grant additional...
Mr. Hurley, you don't have to read the whole thing.
No, okay.
We got
no
it in our
problem.
package.
That's-
So. Do we have any
I was just
questions?
going to go really quick.
Yeah, do we have any questions from Mr. Hurley on this item? This is $30,000
Yeah.
coming from the state for the
It's
redo of the
100%
study.
reimbursable. It's been supported by all the Fairfield state representatives, and we would be able to start the work as soon as the agreement is finalized, and it should take about a year or so. So that's
Any
all.
other questions, comments, concerns from board members? Anything? Yes, Mrs. LeClaire.
Is there any concern that this could be cut or anyway, or we're already approved?
It's essentially approved. They have a bonding measure from the state on that. Right now, it's just signing the agreement, and we're ready to go. Everything's been passed on the state side.
Anybody else? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to call for a vote on this to accept from the state a reimbursable grant in the sum of $30,000 for the Rooster River Flood Control Project Study as read. Is item number 6. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? That item carries. Thank you.
Okay.
Now we'll go into number 7. To hear, consider, and act upon our following resolution as recommended by the Director of Public Works. Joe, you're killing me here. Whereas it is in the best interest of the Town of Fairfield Water Pollution Control Authority to purchase and install a new generator at the wastewater treatment plant, and whereas the cost of purchasing and installing is $463,000, where $347,250 as 75% reimbursement is provided through a federal pre-disaster mitigation grant, through a FEMA grant administered by the State of Connecticut's Department of Emergency Management and Homeland Security, and the remaining balance of $115,750 is to be funded by the Water Pollution Control Authority. Now there be it resolved that Michael C. Tetreau, First Selectman of the Town of Fairfield, is duly authorized to enter into and sign contracts on behalf of the Town of Fairfield Water Pollution Control Authority and with the State of Connecticut's Department of Emergency Management and Homeland Security for the purpose of obtaining a federal FEMA grant and to accept and expend said grant. And further resolved that the First Selectman is authorized to provide such additional information and execute such other documents as may be required by the state or federal government in connection with said contracts, and to execute any amendments, rescissions, and revisions thereto to secure said grant. Can I have a motion to put this before us? Go with Mrs. LeClaire. We'll go with a second, Mr. Mottola. Do we have any comments on this? Mr. Michelangelo, want to tell us a little bit about it? We'll go to Mrs. Marmion first for questions after you give a brief little introduction here.
Sure. This is one of 3 generators which services the Water Pollution Control Facility on Richard White Way. The generator is approximately 25 years old. It's a diesel generator, so it's nearing the end or at the end of its normal service life. Once again, there was a FEMA grant opportunity which would pay 75% of it because it is a critical facility. We applied for the grant. We received it. So this will be funded entirely. So the town share, the local share, is $115,750. That's a 25%. So we get a new generator, natural gas, to service the needs of the water pollution control for 25 cents on the dollar. This is going to be integrated into the whole microgrid project, which combines not just the generators but solar and a fuel cell. So it's a good project, and WPCA approved it probably about 2 months ago. And with the budget season, we didn't get a chance to come to you until now.
Thank you, Mr. Michelangelo. Ms. Marmion.
Thank you. So the cost for removing the current generator and the diesel tank, is that included in this total cost, or is it a significant cost? And then once we remove it, where do we put it? Do we have to find a place to put it, and how does that work cost-wise?
Yeah, it's all inclusive. So the design of the generator, electrical wiring, the purchasing of it, the installation, the removal of the old equipment will all be paid for through the total $463,000. So the contractor, the bid contractor, will be responsible for the demolition and removal. And the way you do it, you put the new one in service first, and then you demolish the old one.
Any other questions, comments, concerns from board members? Seeing none, I'm going to call for a vote on this item. The item, once again, is the cost of purchasing and installing a generator at the wastewater treatment plant. It's $463,000, $347,250, 75% reimbursable through a federal pre-disaster mitigation grant, and $115,750 to be funded by the Water Pollution Control Authority, as read as item number 7 in our minutes, in our agenda. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? That item carries. We'll go to item number 8. To hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Director of Public Works. Whereas it is in the best interest of the town of Fairfield Water Pollution Control Authority to replace a portion of the East Trunk Sewer Line, the project, in the town of Fairfield, and whereas the estimated cost of the project is $2.5 million, and the Board of Selectmen, the estimated cost of the project is $2.5 million, and Board of Selectmen, that seems like a typo, whereas the Connecticut Department of Economic Community Development is willing to provide a grant of $750,000 to fund a portion of the cost of the project, provided that the remainder of such costs are provided for by the WPCA. And whereas the WPCA is subject to the receipt of the grant, appropriated and agreed to spend its own funds in the amount of $1,750,000 to pay for costs of such project not funded by the grant. Now, therefore be it resolved that the first selectman of the town of Fairfield is hereby authorized to accept said grant and expend in the name of and on behalf of the WPCA up to $2.5 million to fund the project, $750,000 of the project cost to be reimbursed by the grant. Do I have a motion to put this before us? Mr. DeWitt, do I have a second? We're going to go Mr. Becker. Thank you. The items before us, I want to do one thing here. Mr. Mayor, if I go to the top of the page, before I turn it over, it's just an ministerial item. It says, whereas the estimated cost of the project is $2.5 million and the Board of Selectmen, and that just kind of hangs out there. Any of the attorneys want to? I think it's a typo.
Should just be eliminated.
Yeah, so I'm going to make a motion to amend this as read, to lose the words "and the Board of Selectmen" after the project is $2.5 million. Do I have a second in my motion? Mr. Mottola. Any other comments on my motion? Seeing none, I'd like to call for a vote just on my motion to amend this, to lose "and Board of Selectmen." All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? That item carries, so the motion as amended is now before us. Go ahead, Mr. Michelangelo.
Okay. Did the Board of Selectmen vote on this already?
Yes, they did.
They approved it.
Correct.
Thank you. Yep.
So would it be, I'm just wondering if it was now therefore be it resolved that the first selectman and the Board of Selectmen? Is that where it's supposed to be?
I don't know. We could kick it back to him if we need to.
Okay.
Thank you.
No.
No? Okay, go ahead, Mr. Michelangelo.
Okay. This is to address some problems in the east trunk line of the sewer system of the town of Fairfield. There are a couple weak links in the chain. One is actually right along here, which is probably the bigger of the problems. The other bottleneck occurs in the east trunk line after it leaves the Metro train station. So as part of the Metro train station project, the entire line was replaced and upgraded throughout that project to a uniform, brand new 36-inch pipe. After it leaves the train station property per se, it crosses a wetland, and then it goes to the area where Mohegan Concrete is over there, Ash, Kennard, and from that point where it leaves the train station until it reconnects on Riverside Drive behind Vinnie's Ale House, just for a reference point. For that
Not that you've been there or anything. No.
For that 3,000 linear feet, it doesn't run across town roads. It runs across the wetlands, it runs across backyards, through easements, cuts across where the Jewish home parking lot is there. So when they constructed it in 1950, one of the oldest lines in our system, that was the route that they chose. What this project will do is replace it with brand new state-of-the-art pipe and replace the nearly 70-year-old pipe and relocate it about 100 feet inland to run on a town road, so it'll remove the bottlenecks, uniform 36-inch pipe. Out of the two areas, this is the small of the two problem areas identified. This is the smaller of the cost-wise linear feet. This section here is the larger part.
And when you say it's a problem area, is it just because of the old design, and is it failing, or what makes it a problem area?
Hydraulically, it's a problem. It's a restriction in the pipe. So our pipe size goes from 36-inch to 33 down to 30, and we do have overflows out of our system. So there are occasions where the pipe can't handle the flow and it leaves the system, which is not good. And because of where it's located, you get brackish water from Ash Creek entering the pipe. Because it's 70 years old, when you get deflections in the pipe, it causes more infiltration into the pipe.
Do we have questions or comments on this item from anyone?
And once again, this is totally funded by the WPCA and their fund balance. Okay.
So I'm going to call for a motion on that. I'm going to call for a vote on this, and it's the estimated cost of the project is $2.5 million. The Connecticut Department of Economic Development is willing to provide a grant of up to $750,000 to fund a portion of the cost of the project. The remainder of such costs are provided for by the WPCA, and the WPCA, subject to receipt of the grant, appropriated and agreed to spend its own funds in the amount of $1,750,000 to pay for the cost of the projects not funded by the town. It's item number 8 in the agenda, as amended and as written here. Yes.
Who's doing the actual work, installing the pipes?
Yeah. We go out for a public bid, so a licensed contractor, construction contractor, would do the work.
Okay.
So we'd hire a consulting engineering firm to design it, and a bid contractor would perform the construction.
So the costs are all included, however, in this total price?
Yes.
Even without knowing all the bids?
Correct.
Thank you.
All in favor? Opposed? Abstention? That item carries. Thank you very much. And the longest item of the night, item number 9. I assume this was approved by the Board of Selectmen at their meeting earlier this week. Is that a correct statement? Correct statement. Okay. To hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Director of Public Works. Whereas it is desirable in the public interest of the town of Fairfield Water Pollution Control Authority to replace the Mill River Pump Station generator, the project, and whereas the estimated cost of the project is $160,370, and whereas the reimbursable FEMA federal pre-disaster mitigation grant administered by the state of Connecticut's Department of Emergency Management and Homeland Security in a sum not to exceed $120,277.50 is available to fund up to 75% of the project costs. And whereas on April 26, 2017, the WPCA voted unanimously, subject to receipt of said grant, to appropriate and spend its own funds up to $40,092.50 to fund 25% of said project costs. And whereas on April 26, 2017, the WPCA voted unanimously to request that to the extent said grant requires approval by the town of Fairfield, that the town approve said grant. Now therefore be it resolved that the town of Fairfield, on behalf of the WPCA, accepts the grant, and further resolved that to the extent said grant requires approval by the town of Fairfield, the town approves said grant. And further resolved that the town of Fairfield, subject to receipt of said grant, is hereby authorized to expend in the name of and on behalf of the WPCA up to $160,370 to fund the project, 75% of said cost to be reimbursed by said grant. And further resolved that First Selectman of the town of Fairfield is duly authorized to enter into and sign contracts on behalf of the WPCA with the State of Connecticut's Department of Emergency Management and Homeland Security for the purpose of obtaining said grant, and further resolved that the First Selectman is authorized to provide such additional information and execute such other documents as may be required by the state or federal government in connection with said grant contracts, and to execute any amendments, rescissions, revisions thereto to secure said grant. Do I have a motion? I'll take Mr. Walsh and the second by Mr. Mottola. The item is now before us. Any questions, comments, or what do you want to say to start, Mr. Michelangelo?
This is the same grant program as the one in number 7. Instead of being located at the plant, it's located at the Mill River Pump Station, which is by the Sturgis Road Bridge, which is our largest pump station. So same program, replacing a old diesel generator with a natural gas brand new generator. WPCA is funding the 25% local share. Federal government is paying 75% of the total cost.
Are the current generators and things at the end of their useful lives? I hate to see us just wasting federal money.
Yeah, they're all 20 years plus.
That's what I thought. Okay, I just want to go on the record on that, because it sounds like, you know, we're just grabbing money here, and I don't like that sound. Does anybody have any questions on this item? Come on, for the length of it, somebody could ask a question.
The Board of Selectmen's not voted on this? Is that
They
still?
have.
They voted out yesterday. Yeah.
Okay.
The agenda was prepared before yesterday's meeting in anticipation. All right, seeing no other questions, I'm going to briefly summarize. Item number 9 on the agenda, whereas the estimated cost of the project is $160,370, and whereas a reimbursable federal pre-disaster mitigation grant administered by the state of Connecticut's Department of Emergency Management and Homeland Security in a sum not to exceed $120,277.50 is available to fund up to 75% of the project costs. And the WPCA is subject to receipt of the grant to appropriate and spend its own funds of up to $40,092.50 to fund 25% of said project costs. Questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstention? That item carries. Thank you, Mr. Michelangelo.
Thank you.
Been busy.
Yeah, he's very busy. Also, any other communications? We are at that time of the night. Everything else has been voted on. Anybody have anything else to add? Okay. I'd like to thank everybody once again for all their time and attention and hard work on the budget season. And did somebody have something over here? Nope. Thought I saw you point over there. You're pulling the bait and switch on me there. All right. I take a motion to adjourn. Go with Mrs. Leclerc, second by Mr. DeWitt. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you, everybody.